Hey now, in today's video I wanted to go ahead and compare my RTX 3080 Ti against my RX 7900 XTX in ray tracing at 4K. Now this isn't supposed to be an apples to apples comparison obviously, but I was just curious about it and I've chosen 6 games with ray tracing for this. 3 of them are AMD sponsored, the other 2 are NVIDIA sponsored, and then the third is not sponsored by either as far as I'm aware. We'll be using my Ryzen 7800X 3D system for this, and we got a ROG Strix 3080 Ti and a Sapphire Nitro Plus 7900 XTX. Let's not waste any time and get on with the first game. Now, I've been quite ill lately, so don't mind my voice, but the first game we're going to go with here is Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, and we're running the game at 4K. Obviously, that's going to be the focus here, and I've maxed out all the settings, essentially, including the ray tracing. This game supports variable rate shading, VRS, and what that is essentially is kind of like dynamic resolution, but that happens in parts of the screen. We're going to leave it off for this test because we're going to go with a more 4K focus, but you could put this on 2x or even higher for more performance at the cost of visual fidelity, essentially, right? So it's kind of like foveated rendering on virtual reality headsets. It's supposed to dynamically lower the resolution of the periphery of your vision, things that you're not directly noticing, at the cost of visual fidelity. So this is actually a good way to gain some performance if you have an AMD GPU, because there is no FSR support unfortunately in this game, and there is NVIDIA DLSS, but we're not going to use that. We're going to go with 4K native essentially, and I've disabled the advanced physics and Hairworks just to kind of, you know, not make it a bit more fair, I suppose. Shading rate, we want that at 1x. That's essentially 100% of your targeted resolution, right? You could lower that, you render it a lower resolution than what you have it set at. We have it set at 4K. We want it to be 4K, so we're leaving it at 1x, okay? What I chose to do essentially is that I lost my game save a long time ago, so I just wanted to kind of just play the first 5 minutes of the very beginning of the game. And yeah, this game is actually very demanding if you just run it raw like this, and kind of surprised, well, not really that surprising, but it seems to be that both GPUs are performing very similarly in this game, although I do think that the 7900 XTX has a bit smoother frame times, but I have noticed with some of these games, the 3080 Ti actually keeps up with the 7900 XTX with ray tracing in games that have multiple ray tracing effects. Now, some of these are NVIDIA sponsored as well, so make of that what you will, but we are going to compare it to AMD sponsored titles also. So in this game, it appears that they are both pretty similar, but we'll see how it progresses towards the end of this run. Once we get over on the inside, we'll see which one is ahead. Now, one thing we do have the ability to do in this game with a 3080 Ti is that we have access to DLSS quality. And if we turn that on, we can actually get a pretty consistent 4K 60 experience, because now that we're inside the tunnel, for some reason, it becomes a lot more demanding. Now we've dropped into the 40s. You would think that outside it would probably be a little bit more demanding, but if we were to put on DLSS quality now, you can see that we've almost closely doubled our FPS just by doing that. Now, unfortunately, this game is a bit old, and they never added FSR, so that is kind of unfortunately. I really wish it did have FSR, because we would be able to get the same type of performance with the 7900 XTX. But anyway, let's go back to the 7900 XTX. We're gonna cut ahead a little bit here right before this upcoming ambush, so be wary. Little jump scare, I guess. But yeah, I mean, like I said, you can kind of tell that the 7900 XTX has smoother frame times, and you can see that on the 1% lows. They're a bit higher on the 7900 XTX, although the FPS averages are higher on the 3080 Ti. But yeah, I would say these two are performing somewhat similarly. And interestingly enough, the power consumption is actually almost identical on both of these cards. The 3080 Ti I have is a ROG Strix OC, which has a 450 watt BIOS, I believe, from the factory. Both cards are overclocked from the factory. They're like high-end partner cards, and I haven't manually overclocked either of them, so they're both running stock. But I think this kind of about wraps it up for this game. We'll go on and move on to the next because we have 5 more to go. But yeah, I would say it's pretty much a draw here, right? So yeah, let's move on to the next game. For the next title, we're going to go with an AMD sponsored title, a very recent title, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. And we're going to use FSR and DLSS quality here with the Ultra preset. And for Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, we're going to actually use the built-in benchmark just because it cycles through a few different scenarios, and it also gives a score at the end of the run that we can take a look at. But yeah, they seem to be pretty close to one another here as well. Now this game has multiple ray traced effects, and it will take advantage of hardware accelerated ray tracing if your GPU supports it, and if it doesn't, it has a software fallback solution. So it is a pretty good title to check out. It's also a very recent title, and it also has a very good implementation of FSR actually as well. So yeah, I would say this is a pretty good comparison. We're going with DLSS on the NVIDIA and FSR3 on the AMD GPUs. This here's the last scenario of the benchmark round for Avatar Frontiers of Pandora. And as far as 1% lows and averages go, I'd been resetting them for each scenario just because it's more fair that way. You know, when the game's loading, things tend to kind of mess up a little, I guess. So kind of take the averages 1% lows with kind of a grain of salt because, you know, it's a short run. But this is our score for the 3080 Ti, which is 4,973. And then this is our 7900 XTX, which scored a 5,487, so a little higher. You guys can pause if you want to take a more thorough look. The next title on the list will be the Callisto Protocol, which is another AMD sponsored title with multiple ray traced effects. As you can see here, we got reflections, shadows, and transmissions, and this is a very, very good looking game with some impressive visuals in my opinion. We're running the game at 4K here as well with all the settings maxed out. However, we're using FSR quality just because this game is actually quite demanding. And what I've done is essentially just the beginning of the game all the way to the part where the ship crashes back into the moon of Callisto. And we're gonna sort of kind of fast forward and skip throughout this area here, but you can take a look at the 1% lows and averages here. It's essentially a recording of the performance from the beginning all the way to that part where the ship crashes. And essentially what we're getting here is clearly the 7900 XTX has an advantage over the 3080 Ti in FPS averages. As far as 1% lows, they're actually very close. Now, just remember that this game doesn't have the best performance. Even after many patches, the performance is not great. Although it's way better than it used to be, but it's still not very good, especially with ray tracing on. If you turn ray tracing off, it's actually not that bad. And if we had ray tracing off, the 7900 XTX would be very well ahead of the 3080 Ti. But again, this is a ray tracing focused comparison, so that's kind of why what we're doing here. And yeah, as you can see here, as a matter of fact, we have a little bit higher 1% lows on the 3080 Ti, but they're pretty close, I would say. Yeah.
Transfer flight control to my station! Transferring flight controls! This is bad, Jacob! Mayday, mayday, mayday! This is UJC Charon! Returning to Callisto! Requesting emergency clearance!
Negative, UJC Charon. You are not authorized for re-entry.
Sorry, but I got no choice! You're coming in hot! Boost the antigraphs! Already at maximum! We're not gonna make it! Yes, we are! Watch out! Hold on! Brace for impact!
For the next game, we have another AMD-sponsored title, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. And we're running the game at 4K with epic settings, ray tracing is on. We're using FSR quality for the Radeon GPU and DLSS quality for the RTX GPU. Now this one surprised me, because if you look at the performance metrics, the 7900 XTX is completely getting bodied by the RTX 3080 Ti with ray tracing on here. And I did not expect this. I expected maybe about on par. So I'm not sure what's happening here, but I did run through this area twice. This is the second recording of the 7900 XTX that I did. Now my run was only all the way up to the elevator, and we're gonna kind of skip through this run just so that it's not crazy long. But just for the sake of transparency, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna also show you the recording of each GPU where I go through the settings and then begin the game without any cuts, so that you can see for yourself that these are the settings, because it did kind of surprise me. And I think you should probably see it for yourself as well. So yeah, I'm not sure why this is, to be honest, because this game is a brand new game that was actually given away in promotions with Radeon GPUs. So yeah, it's kind of as a matter of fact, I got this game with my 7800 X3D purchase, believe it or not, and I love this game. This is one of my favorite games of last year. Baldur's Gate is probably my game of the year, but this is on the top 5 for sure. Performance issues, yes, still, but a great game. Great Star Wars game. Alright, so let's go through the settings then. This is the 7900 XTX recording, and as you can see, everything's on Epic, 4K, FSR set to quality, and then I didn't touch anything else. And this is the beginning. This is the same recording I used on the side-by-side just a minute ago. And you can see here we begin with around 46 FPS. And then here's the 3080 Ti, same settings, 4K, Epic. And we're using DLSS 3 super resolution. Obviously no frame generation. It's not supported on the RTX 3000s. And we begin at around 60 FPS. So just for the sake of transparency, I wanted to show this. Anyway, I think we should probably move on to the next game. And the next game is going to be Cyberpunk 2077 at 4K. We're using DLSS balance and FSR balanced. We have ray tracing on with ray trace lighting on ultra. Then every other setting is essentially maxed out. And we're going to run the built-in benchmark just because it's easier, it's more consistent, and we can look at the results in the end. And here we are. And yeah, I think in here the 3080 Ti is actually a little bit ahead. 4K with ray tracing on in this game is actually very demanding. I mean, even rasterization alone in this game is very demanding. So, but yeah, I mean, the game does look pretty good, I would say. I also did a FSR and DLSS quality benchmark run. I guess I'll show that as well. Video's getting kind of long, but I will show that as well, and then we'll also look at the results in the end as well. Yeah, as far as averages and 1% lows, the 3080 Ti is a little bit ahead, but not by much, really. It's about, I would say, very close. And this is the 3080 Ti stats. And this is the 7900 XTX. And if you guys want to look at these in more detail, you can feel free to pause and check it out. And here we have DLSS and FSR quality. It's the same exact settings as the previous benchmark. And we pretty much seen the same type of difference, right? The 3080 Ti is a little bit ahead, but for the most part they're very close, the 3080 Ti and 7900 XTX here. Yeah, I mean, I would say with the DLSS and FSR quality at 4K with these settings, it's not really 30s to the 40s, not really my preferred frame rate, but to each their own. I would say with balance is better, maybe tweak the settings a little bit to get a 60 FPS experience, but that's besides the point, right? The whole purpose of this comparison is to look at the ray tracing specifically in multiple games, AMD, NVIDIA sponsored, that sort of thing. But yeah, these are the numbers, and we'll take a look at the results right now. Here we have the RTX 3080 Ti numbers. And here we have the 7900 XTX numbers. Let's get on the next game. And the last game's gonna be Forza Motorsport at 4K native, no FSR, no DLSS, and we're maxing the game out completely. Full ray trace reflections and RTAO quality on Ultra, and we're gonna run the built-in benchmark just because it's a nice benchmark to run. It's a very heavy benchmark, so it's a good test. And here we can see the 7900 XTX is actually quite a bit ahead. Not crazy ahead, but it is ahead, noticeably ahead, I would say. And yeah, we got pretty good 1% lows compared to the averages. I would say it's pretty good. So, and then we're going to do a little tiny race too, and then I'll give out my final thoughts. But here's the numbers for the 3080 Ti. And these are the numbers for the 7900 XTX. If you guys want to pause, feel free. Well, to wrap this long video up then and share my thoughts, I guess I'm not all that surprised with the results because I wanted to focus more on titles that are somewhat more recent and have somewhat heavier ray tracing effects, you know, not like just like reflections or something light. You know, I wanted to focus on titles that have more than just one RT effects, and then also wanted to throw in some AMD sponsored titles as well for a good balance. And yeah, I would say these two GPUs are pretty much on par. I mean, we've seen one get ahead of the other, and yeah, as a matter of fact, I think the 3080 Ti is a little bit faster when it comes to ray tracing, based off my experience here and comparing these titles. As a matter of fact, I did a video comparing Ratchet and Clank a few months ago. As a matter of fact, here it is, and the 3080 Ti was noticeably ahead on that game as well at 1440p with all ray tracing maxed out, all the RT effects. However, the Achilles heel for the 3080 Ti in that particular title for me was a 12 gig VRAM buffer. At 4K, you can play just fine without ray tracing, but you enable ray tracing and you run into VRAM issues with that 12 gig VRAM buffer. So there hasn't really been many other games that have run into VRAM issues at 4K, really, that I can think of, but you know, it is one of those things that could turn out to be a limiting factor with future titles, maybe. I don't know. At 4K anyway. But I am curious to see what AMD does with ray tracing in their next generation of GPUs, because they do actually really well as long as it's like one RT effects. But once you add multiple ones, they tend to fall behind a little bit more versus the NVIDIA, even last gen, when it comes to ray tracing. If it was rasterization though, the 3080 Ti would get demolished by the 7900 XTX. But I might take a look at some lighter ray tracing titles as well on a separate video. But anyway, I hope you guys like this though. If you did like it, give it a like. And if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing and leave a comment below. Tell me what you think, or if you have any suggestions, or if you disagree or whatever. Leave your comments below. I will read them. Thank you. I hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.